Hi everybody, welcome. As you may know, Sundays and Fugue Kits and animations have been leaked with exact numbers. Personally, I am very excited for these characters, so I wanted to make a short video analyzing their kits, since they are characters I'm going to be pulling. Plus, it will be fun to see how right or wrong I end up being rewatching this video after 2.7.
First of all, let's very briefly go through his basic kit, since it's available on DG Cat. His basic is a regular basic. Sunday's skill 100% action advances a single ally target, and Thier summon. It then grants the ally 40 to 80 damage %, depending on whether the ally has a summon or not, 20 crit rate, a cleanse, and a skill point every 3 casts. His ultimate is standard 130 cost, and grants a target ally 25% of his crit damage, plus 8% crit damage as a 3-turn aura buff, as well as one-time energy equal to 20% of the target's max energy. Only one ally can be the recipient of this buff at a time. I don't know if his technique is a buff or an active ability, but it's likely a buff. His technique grants 50 damage % to all allies for 2 turns. He also generates 25 energy at the start of each battle. It's clear that Sunday's kit is just an iteration of Bronya's kit. To be honest, I'm very disappointed with his kit, because of how identical it is to Bronya's. You will likely play Sunday the exact same way as you play Bronya. However, there definitely are a few differences I will point out. First, the only big difference with Sunday is that he can action forward summons. As for now, this isn't very useful since there are no great summon carries. However, it's pretty obvious there will be future characters that revolve around summons. For now, Lingsha will be a pretty good DPS, and Jingyuan may finally become viable. Apart from that, Sunday's skill grants a moderately larger damage buff than Bronya's due to its longer duration. This may not be as significant as you think, since DPS units usually align their strong attacks with Bronya's damage buff. I should note that Sunday doesn't have Bronya's advance forward, so you can't really run a fast Sunday in the same way you can with Bronya. Also, E1 Bronya is slightly more skill point friendly, but EO Bronya is slightly less. That said, Sunday's ultimate is overall about equal or slightly weaker than Bronya's. Bronya's raw damage buff is much higher than Sunday's, but it has a lower duration. The way this swings depends on the way the DPS outputs their damage. Lastly, Sunday uniquely provides 20% energy, which is fairly good. Unfortunately though, this is much weaker than Tingyan and Huohuo. But because Sunday's kit is already so strong, this additional 20% energy may push him over the edge of Bronya or Sparkle in certain teams. In short, he is a moderately stronger Bronya. He has moderately weaker peak buffs, but has much more consistent buff application and bonus energy. I will now go through teams and characters that I predict will synergize incredibly well with him. First, Lingsha and Jingyuan will obviously greatly benefit from Sunday's release. I don't think I have to explain why. Blade would appreciate Sunday as a Bronya improvement, however I doubt he will replace her with Jingliu, since she doesn't appreciate crit as much and has an oscillating damage pattern, but he is definitely very strong with her. He also seems very synergistic with Doctor Ratio, granting energy and speed in one unit, making me think he'll replace Tingyan here. That said, I don't have much experience playing Ratio, so I'm not too sure about this. Other DPS units that I'm unsure of whether they'll work with Sunday or not would be with Seal as a Bronya replacement, Fixio 4th slot replacing Bronya Argenti with Bronya, and Clara with Sparkle or Topaz or March. Sunday also synergizes very well with his sister Robin, as he provides many damage multipliers that Robin does not. His technique can be snapshotted by her, and he can use his skill on Robin to grant her a persistent damage percent buff, similar to Bronya. Also, traditionally, hypercarry teams will use Sparkle or Bronya with Tingyan exclusively, leaving no room for Robin. However, in some teams, Sunday could do their jobs well enough such that running Sunday and Robin may be an upgrade. On top of that, running a Sunday will give your carry a lot of actions, and if paired with the fast 4th unit, will generate a lot of energy for Robin. Overall, I was kind of disappointed that Sunday's kit was so similar to Bronya's. He definitely does have some differences, mainly the energy generation and consistency. However, it's still mostly the same. That said, his kit is very strong, and is definitely up there with every other top-tier support next to some like Robin, Sparkle, Tingyan, etc.
Fugue's kit is fairly simple, so let's briefly go through the specifics. First, her basic is a regular basic, and she has an enhanced basic which can be used when Fugue uses her skill. Her skill can be cast on an ally and grants them a 40% break effect or a buff for 3 turns. Also, the buff grants them a buff such that after each ally hit, Fugue has a 100% base chance to apply an 18% death down. Her ult is a simple damage instance that applies 20 AoE all-type toughness reduction, and will apply the fire weakness effect if this attack breaks. This is significant since Fire Break has the highest multiplier. Fugue also allows Exo Toughness at 50% of the enemy's original max toughness, which is just a bonus toughness bar that can deal break damage. Also, Fugue grants a permanent 100% super break multiplier to all allies. Fugue also grants 15% break effect for 2 turns max twice after each break. Also, Fugue delays enemies' actions 15% after they break, grants herself 30% permanent break effect, and refunds 1 skill point after the first use of her skill. Fugue's technique 40% advances forwards herself and applies her skill's death down on all targets. I'm unsure if this stacks with her skill, but it likely does not. Where it gets interesting is the argument of which teams she will slot well into. Now, let's move on to discussing Fugue's place in various teams. First, let's talk about Firefly, since she is the most popular break unit. She's also the only one I've extensively played, so I feel I can talk about this pretty confidently. Also, there's a ton of misinformation I've been seeing on YouTube from some videos and comments. For such a simple question, it's strange how much discussion there is. Anyways, to start, there actually is something Harmony MC does better than Fugue, which is being able to hold dance and being able to proc its passive probably the most often out of all harmonies. There may be cases where this is more valuable than everything else Fugue provides, however I can't see how that would be more important than Exo Break and 34% Defense Shred. Now assuming you want a healer, we should talk about whether Ruin Mei is better than Harmony MC with an existing Fugue. Harmony MC gives 100% super break damage, and provides around 100 break effect, while Ruin Mei provides 25% raise pen and 50% break efficiency. Ruin Mei also does significant personal break damage at 30k per instance depending on enemy's max toughness, which can proc twice with Fugue, and grants 10% speed to allies. However, those are not as important as the differences I mentioned earlier. The more important aspect is the damage. Trailblazer clearly leads in raw damage, so let's see if Ruin Mei can compensate. If Ruin Mei lets Firefly get an additional half turn every 4 turns of super break damage, she indirectly increases Firefly's damage by 14%, and the gap gets exponentially bigger the more turns she allows. Most of this assumes you'll be playing at least slightly optimally. In most cases, the natural variance in the performance of Ruin Mei or Harmony MC on a Firefly team just from things not aligning will supersede any innate differences between the two. Now if you can spare not using a healer, running Harmony MC with Ruin Mei may be better. However, I do not recommend switching out a healer, especially Lingsha, to run both Ruin Mei and Harmony MC. Lingsha and Gallagher do way too much toughness reduction damage and damage in general to be replaced. Lingsha especially is so good to the point where she can literally replace Firefly's DPS role. So swapping her out for Harmony MC or Ruin Mei is absurd, even if Firefly will gain a super break buff. In case that was a bit confusing, the conclusion is actually very simple and obvious. Ruin Mei would typically be better. However, in cases where you can somehow lower the enemy's toughness very quickly, Harmony MC would be better. For example, with this current Memory of Chaos 12, both sides would prefer different units. For the first side, Eternal Show is a relatively low toughness gauge enemy, such that Fugue plus Lingsha plus Harmony MC should be able to easily break it before Firefly gets in action. The second side with Hule is much more obvious. Hule has incredibly high toughness gauge with 2 phases, thus toughness reduction is very important. As for sustainless teams, I would never replace Lingsha with either Harmony, and even with Gallagher, Firefly is not strong enough to sacrifice team damage for personal damage. The only other break unit we really have is Boothill, and I think Fugue's Exo toughness and super break would be incredibly valuable with him. I haven't played Boothill, so I don't really know anything about his team building and whether Fugue can replace any of his existing teammates, but from a very limited perspective, she seems pretty good for him. I'm also not going to be talking about characters like Kameko, since I like to assume off element, and break characters that have no way of being consistent in that regard are just not worth it. Overall, Fugue seems like a very strong unit, surpassing our current super break supports, which right now is just Harmony MC. However, I doubt she'd be strong enough to be mandatory in, at the very least, Firefly teams.